Hello and welcome to episode 2 of my knitting podcast here on YouTube. My name is Vanessa Smith and I'm the designer behind Vanessa Smith Designs, but you can call me Ness, and this is Knit with Ness. Before I dive into today's episode though, there are a couple things that I just wanted to make sure I say here at the outset. First of all, it's fall, y'all. I've been wanting to say that for a long time. This is my favorite season. It's cozy season, it's sweater weather, and it's finally here in the Northern Hemisphere. So I hope that those of you who are also having your fall, I hope you're having a great one so far and that you're here for it like I am. And my second thing that I wanted to say was thank you. Thank you so much for the warm reception to my very first episode. I appreciated all your comments, everyone for joining me by subscribing. It really means a lot that you want to hang out with me, knit with me, and I appreciate you being here, so thank you again. I do have a goal for today's episode, and that is to limit my use of the word excited, because apparently I was really excited in the first episode. And I know there are other words, but that was my favorite word that episode. So this time I'm going to try to use some variety. But I am excited. I'm excited to be here and to do this. And there I go again, right? Okay, let's get into what I'm wearing. Let's just move on from all that. So today I'm wearing my latest pattern called Meant to Be. I just released it on Friday, October 4th. And this pattern has been a long time in the making. It has a story that I won't get into here on this episode, but I did write a blog post all about it, and it actually is the story behind the name, what made it come to be named Meant to Be. It's a story of hope and failure and perseverance. So if that's something that interests you, I will link that below in the description box. But this is my latest pattern, and I'm so happy that it's finally here. Again, it's been a long time in the making, so it's a little surreal, and it means a lot to have it finally out in the world and to see other people making it their own, especially the test knitters when they were making their projects too. It was so cool to see it come to life in their hands and make them fit their unique bodies and customize it the way they wanted to. And we're going to get into all the customization options here in a second. So this is my sample. I used 2 yarns held together. The first, I don't have the tags anymore because I've had the yarns for so long. I don't even know where they are. The first is Malabrigo dos Tijeras, which is a DK weight baby alpaca and merino wool blend. And the second yarn that I used was 𝙎𝙗𝙤. Oh, they rebranded a little bit, so let me get the name right now. 𝙎𝙗𝙤 Artisan Yarns, 𝙈𝙆𝙬𝙐, and it's a mohair silk, a super kid mohair mulberry silk blend, and that's in the colorway Capriccio Teal. I don't know if I said the name of the Dos Tijeras colorway, so that was Teal Feather if I didn't say that. And kind of a side note, this is random, but the 𝙈𝙆𝙬𝙐 yarn is so funny. I think I got it when I made an Animal Crossing profile, and I ended up naming my island 𝙈𝙆𝙬𝙐 after this yarn, and apparently a really beautiful place in Scotland. So that's just, that was a little fun fact I thought about when I was looking at the yarn name again. I'm like, oh yeah, that's where I got the name from my island. And that island is actually very long abandoned and probably totally overgrown with weeds. If you know the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Unless you're keeping up on your island, which I'm absolutely not. Anyway, that was a little tangent. One thing I wanted to mention, because I can see that you can see it here on the camera, one thing I'm a little bummed about, despite my very best efforts to alternate skeins in the best way possible, you know, I was very good about that. I still did have a very visible transition when I got to knitting the yoke, and I just couldn't bring myself to undo it all again. Again, if you read my story, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So this is here to stay. If you see it in person, you're going to probably notice that too, but that's okay. It is what it is. It's a handmade sweater, and it doesn't detract or it doesn't take away from, you know, the fit overall or anything. So that is just one thing that it wasn't the fault of the yarn. It wasn't the fault of the pattern. It just ended up that way where it was just kind of lighter toward the end there. So that is one thing that I wish would have changed, but you know, it is what it is. On the subject of yarn though, a lot of my testers actually were able to knit the sweater with only one strand held by itself. So a worsted weight yarn or a heavy DK. So you don't necessarily need to work with two yarns held together. It's just how it worked out for my pattern, for my sample. And it just gave me that cozy factor that I was going for. But if you have a mohair sensitivity, or you just don't like the feel of mohair, the look of mohair, you live in a warmer climate, you can totally make it with just one yarn held by itself. There are so many testers projects that you can take a look at to see how that will look without the mohair. So now let's get into some of the pattern features. I like to talk about that here with you today, just because once again, I think it was helpful to talk through what the pattern includes for people who might not be familiar with my style of pattern writing or the elements that I might include or things that you can expect. So this pattern is 16 pages long, and I know that sounds really long, but let me explain. So I do have a page, of course, that has all the abbreviations and several notes, and it will also link you to a playlist of several videos that I developed for this pattern, or the 𝙎𝙎𝙎𝙎, which uses a lot of the same techniques in the same center panel. But this pattern has its own playlist for the techniques that you'll be using for this pattern. And then I've got, again, just like my 𝙎𝙎𝙎𝙎, I've got a full schematic for multiple body measurements that you're going to need. And then it goes right into the customizing the fit section. And that is 3 pages that I think that I'm very proud to have included. I was very happy to be able to include this information. So let me get into what that might look like for you. One of the customizing the fit options is pairing larger size sleeves with a smaller size bust and yoke, or pairing smaller size sleeves with a larger size body and yoke. A lot of times if you look at size charts, for example, you might find that your measurements kind of go between multiple sizes. Like I know from myself personally, if I look at a standard size chart, my bust circumference would suggest that my arms are about 1 inch or 2 smaller than they are. So I like to grade my patterns anyway, just knowing that a lot of our arms are a little larger than the size chart. I do grade my patterns with a little larger arm circumferences, but sometimes you might need a smaller sleeve, or you might need a larger sleeve even than I accounted for. So the pattern has a very detailed worksheet for both scenarios for you to figure out how to pair larger sleeves or smaller sleeves with a different size body and yoke. And several testers use that modification, and I think it worked out really well. It's pretty awesome. Another modification that the pattern allows for, though, is pairing one size larger hips with a smaller size waist and bust. So again, if you look at the size chart, and a lot of times some of us are more hippie. Like again, right here, I have much wider hips than a pattern or than a standard size chart might suggest for my frame. So with that in mind, I have included instructions for pairing one size larger hips with a smaller size waist and bust, and even for one size larger than the largest size. So I do have 13 sizes in the pattern, and you can, if you make size 1, you can make the size 2 hips with the size 1, so on and so forth, and even one size larger than 13, so that you can make the modification as well if you need to. I then also included my sample size, my height, my own measurements, so you can see exactly the amount of ease that I have for my sample. Like when you look at the pattern notes, for example, I recommend 2 to 3 inches of negative ease. What is that in centimeters? Let me make sure I can. 5 to 7.5 centimeters of negative ease at the full bust, and kind of similar ease throughout. Like at the waist, I usually have a little bit of no ease or positive ease, and then at the hips, I have negative ease again. I have nearly 6 inches or 15 centimeters of negative ease at my hips. I knit the size 3 as written, but again, if you're like, I really don't want that much negative ease, you could go up a hip size, and then the pattern will walk you through how to get to the numbers for the smaller size bust. One more thing, or a couple more actually, for this piece. This pattern once again has instructions for including vertical darts. So let's say that you're choosing a yoke size that gives you the best sleeves or the best circumference around the upper bust, but it might have a little bit more than 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters of negative ease at the bust. There are instructions for adding vertical darts. You can add anywhere from 1.25 inches, which is 3 centimeters, all the way up to 3.25 inches or 8 centimeters of width in the front only if you need to account for slightly wider bust than a yoke size. And then of course, the pattern also includes instructions how to modify the lengths. So if I like longer, I have monkey arms. I don't know what it is. I have long arms. I'm only 5'2", but my arms are very long. And so if your arms are shorter than mine, if you're like, hey, these are way too long, the pattern will tell you again how to change the length of the sleeve shaping portions. Also, if you want to change the length of the body, the torso, the pattern will tell you how to do that as well. And then also how to deepen the yoke or make up for a gauge that's greater than my row gauge in the pattern. All right, so the sweater starts with the sleeves because it is bottom up. The sleeves go so fast, and a lot of the testers were saying how fun they were. There was no sleeve island feeling. It felt very much like, let's get these sleeves done. They got done really fast and they were able to move on to the body. The sleeves here, I've got these cables. You see that? And the sleeves, the cables are mirrored. So they're not the same for both sleeves. And the cable panel is both written and charted. So whatever you prefer to work from, the pattern has got your back. And then this was really cool. When working with the test knitters, we got to a point where the shaping, they're like, can we have something a little more visualizing or descriptive of like how to do the shaping? And so I was able to develop a sleeve shaping tracker, and it is interactive. So if you have Adobe, or I think it's Preview on MacBooks, and there might be another one actually too, you can check little boxes on it and actually type in the word increase on the rounds you have to increase. And then of course too, if you modify your shaping, you can visually do that using the tracker actually too. So that's pretty cool. And then of course, if you are a paper person, like some people prefer paper copies, you can print it out and you can handwrite on that tracker. So that was really neat to be able to develop that for the testers, and now for you all to have a really easy way that you can make the sleeves and not have to worry about counting rows in between while you're trying to do some TV or read at the same time as knitting, or whatever people like to do. People who read at the same time, can you do that? Because I could never, but I've seen that and it's pretty amazing. So if you can do that, kudos to you, because that is a skill I do not have. All right, so the next piece I have, the body, is after you make both sleeves, you make the body. Again, the front panel here in the center has charted and written instructions for your style of knitting. I've got tutorials linked throughout. They're the same ones from the playlist, but they're also linked where you use them. And then after you work to the apex of the bust on the body, you have the option to add bust darts. And so I have a 1.5 pages in the pattern of bust dart instructions. They're optional, of course, you don't have to do them, but I have several ranges for you to get the best fit for your body and to make sure that your sweaters don't ride up in the front. If you have a larger bust, they might tend to do that. So bust darts might give you some extra depth there and get a better fit for you here in the front of the sweaters. And then another thing I wanted to mention, there's a lot of interactivity in the pattern. I have several boxes for you to have personal notes, and I also have a little schematic for the joining round, because that round is a row. That row is very intense, and I have a note saying that row requires a lot of concentration. Make sure that you can focus uninterrupted before beginning. A lot of the testers appreciated having that note too, because it is pretty intense. But because of that, I also have a schematic showing the joining row, or the setup row, basically how it should look visually in your lap as you're knitting across and joining all the pieces together to start working the yoke as one piece. And finally, there's just for the yoke shaping and the neckline shaping here, or the base of the V, there are a couple shaping trackers once again that are interactive. You can, the spaces to fill in some rows, some information that you might need, and then you can just follow that table. It's a table of for raglan shaping. You can follow that and you don't have to, again, count any rows in between. Everything's laid out for you. So there's very little thought. You have to pay attention, obviously, to the cable panels on the sleeves, but everything else is spelled out for you very clearly and hopefully makes for a very enjoyable knitting experience for you. And that's pretty much it about the pattern. Once again, it's called Meant to V, and there is a story behind the name, and I will link it below because it's a very meaningful story to me. And yeah, it's a huge sense of accomplishment and to have finally seen this go out. So I hope that you love it as much as I do, and I hope that you test out, I hope that you check out my test knitters projects, either on Ravelry or on my website. I have a test knitter gallery on the patterns page at the bottom. Whoever allowed me to use their photos on the website, they're all there, and yeah, they're beautiful. I definitely want to make one in every color. Red and purple might have to happen. If you are new here, go back to the previous episode to know about purple. No, yeah, they're all beautiful. And so I really am so thankful to my test knitters again for this. Several of the test knitters were the same from the vest. We crossed over in between patterns and continued working together, and that was so fun. But these testers, they were so patient because we started this test knit back in February. I believe we were done by mid-May, and then I didn't release the pattern until now. And there were several reasons, lots of things that caused the delay. I cannot talk anymore. There were several things that caused the delay, but again, they were so patient with me and they were so cooperative. And so thank you all for being just awesome. And now my dog's gonna bark. No, he's not. Okay. But yes, thank you. I appreciate all your help, all your time. Test knitters, y'all are, I hope people know how amazing you are. So just know that I appreciate you and you make everything better. And if it weren't for you, this pattern, I don't know, this pattern got to the place that it is because of your help. So thank you. I did have one question on Instagram about this pattern, and that was what type of needles I preferred to use for the sleeves. So I personally, for these sleeves, I magic looped them. And I actually had my magic loop cord come out at the center of the cable for the plain cable rounds. But then when I did the cable, I rearranged my cord a little bit to allow me to do the cable. And then after the cable, I rearranged again to have the cord coming out of the center. I know there were some test knitters who did 2 at a time magic loop, and that was really cool. That is actually a really neat way to save time and to use the tracker, the sleeve shaping tracker just once. So if you are up to the challenge, some people like to do 2 at a time. And I thought that was really clever. So maybe you might like to do that too. You could do double pointed needles if you wanted to, but again, you got to have the cable, on the same needle. So it might take some thinking about how you want to do that. But I found magic loop to be the easiest for this particular pattern. And now I think that's all I have to talk about this sweater. Again, it was very special to finally get this out. And I also want to say at this point that I won't have a pattern release to talk about every episode because I don't release patterns that often, but I just happen to have 2 back to back here at the start of this podcast. But if you do enjoy me talking about my patterns, talking through what's included in them, I have a catalog that I'm very proud of and that I would be happy to talk about and go over. So if there are any patterns that you would like me to talk about, go ahead and let me know in the comments, or I have a Google form actually linked in the description box as well that you can put in your requests. All right, let's talk about other projects. I'm looking at my notes here because, again, I had to have my notes. The first project, I'm dragging needles and yarn. I believe last episode I talked about 2 works in progress and 2 patterns that 2 projects that I was going to be starting. So two of those works in progress are on hold for temporarily. One of them was actually my beaded stars hollow hat. And at the end of that episode, someone actually did ask me if I have a tutorial on adding beads to knitting. And so the funny thing is, I was actually going to be making a video about that, using that project that I'm knitting. I do have a short or a reel on Instagram showing how to add beads to your knitting, but I'm going to make a proper YouTube tutorial because I just find that having the ability to pause or to save is and find things that you've saved is a lot easier here on YouTube. So that is on hold right now until I get that video made. And then my I had a top that I was talking about. That one's on hold now just for a little while. So I'll get back to that. But I did have two projects that I was going to start. So you might remember that purple yarn and then the pretty speckly yarn for a hat. Ooh, look at that, guys. It is all done. So this, I'm just going to show you the crown. I love designing crowns, knitting crowns. They are my absolute favorite on hats. And so I always make sure that I can get a really cool look. Yeah, crowns are my favorite. I completed this hat as part of that knit along at my local yarn store, Indigo Pearls. And let me just say that was such a fun experience. I enjoyed every moment of it. So I met with a group of local knitters twice in September, and I'm going to just give them a little shout out because they were so awesome. So Anne, Siobhan, Claire, Pat, Mary Jo, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining the knit along. And also I cannot leave out Carrie, who's one of the yarn store owners. She was also part of the knit along, and Michelle. So I want to say thank you also to them for letting me host the knit along there, or asking me to do it, letting me have some time in their space to hang out with these local knitters. It was an amazing experience. So yes, this hat got finished after the second session because we all found, well, those of us who are still knitting, there was one knitter who actually made 2 hats in the span of the knit along, and both of hers were beautiful. But for those of us who were still knitting along the second session, we found that knitting color work, especially during the crown shaping, in a group setting was quite distracting. And we loved visiting with each other so much that I think the rest of us had to walk away and finish, on our own time separately. But I'm so happy with how this pattern or how this sample turned out. I love the yarn colors. Once again, you can see little speckles. All the colors are so fun, and I'm just so happy with how this turned out. So also during that knit along, they started looking at some of my other patterns, and we decided to do a class probably very soon for my 𝙤𝙤𝙤𝙤 pattern. So I just need to come up with a little curriculum. I guess that's the word. And I need to come up with, how many sessions there's going to be, how we're going to break down each session, because that cowl is pretty involved as well and has several techniques throughout from cast on to binding off. It's all very unique techniques. So I do need to figure out and plan for that. But I'm very excited to knit with those local knitters once again. They were just such a fun group, and I really enjoyed our time together. So if they're watching, hi, and I hope to see you again. All right, I have one more thing to share because I'm so thrilled, not excited, thrilled. I was about to say excited, but I am so thrilled with how it's turning out, and I just have to show you because it's so cool. It's so cool. My first colorwork sweater. So it's funny because I realized this while I was making this hat. I realized that I developed the color chart for the sweater at the same time that I was designing this hat. And that was just kind of funny, a little realization I had the other day. I'm like, oh, it's been a while since I've had this motif ready to go on a pattern. So, so this is my first colorwork yoke pattern. And I am using 𝙤𝙤𝙤𝙤 Journey Sport in the colorway Latte for the main color. And I'm using Spin Cycle Dyed in the Wool Nostalgia for the color work. And it's funny because actually when I got to like right around here, the purple tried to change on me to like a really punchy flamingo pink almost. Probably not that bright, but it was like a really kind of a salmon pink color. And I was like, no, 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 I want you to end on a darker color. So I actually undid those rows, cut out that bright section and went back to a darker section. And I'm just so happy with how it's looking. Let me check that out. So I think I'm just about ready to separate. Ooh, don't touch the microphone. I think I'm just about ready to separate for the sleeves. I think I'll be doing that here this evening after I sign off of here. And I'm really looking forward to that and seeing how that fits and, you know, then zipping along on the body and the sleeves and getting that ready for test knitting here hopefully pretty soon, you know, while we're all in deep winter, deep fall. I'm messing up my seasons now. I said it's fall and now I'm talking about winter. So, just knitting time. Okay, I need to stop. Knitting season. Yeah, so I think those are my 1FO, my work in progress. Like I said, the other two are just kind of temporarily on hold for now. I do need to pull out another work in progress that I have that will help me prepare for a speaking engagement I have at the end of October. I'm really excited about it. Sorry, I had to say excited, but I am. So I do need to pull out that other project. It's one I started a little while back, but it'll help me prepare for that. So I'll be pulling that out, and then I'll be working on my sweater and that project kind of back and forth, just to kind of have some variety in my works in progress. So other than that, what's else coming up in the next few weeks? Oh, if you live here in the Pacific Northwest, so Washington, Oregon area, Sacred Sheep is coming up in Portland, Oregon, in I think just a couple weeks, actually 2 or 3 weeks. And so I'm going to be there on the Saturday. So if you're going to be there, let me know. I probably will wear this sweater or my bestie vestie, probably this one, because by then it might be really cold. So if you see me, please say hello. I love, 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 love talking to people, meeting people in person, and it makes me sad when I hear like, oh, I saw you, but I didn't say hi. And I'm like, so please say hi, okay? If you see me, I would love to meet you and, you know, take a picture maybe. If you're a picture person. I know some people are like, no pictures, but I love to take pictures if I can. It's hard to remember in the moment, but then I'm like, I'm trying to be better about asking for photos. So let's do it if we meet, okay? All right. I think that's all I have for today. Once again, if you have any questions for me or any requests about, again, if you want to hear me talk about more of my patterns, I have a link in the description box so you can submit questions. And that's where the person submitted the question about the beads. I don't know if I said that someone asked about the beads. So there you go. I'll be making a tutorial here for you soon. And I think that's it. I think that's all I have. And you know what? That actually reminds me, this is actually really funny. My mom, who's not a knitter, she watched the first episode and she's like, I loved it, but you talked about so much. What are you going to talk about next time? And I was like, my mom. So, hi mom, if you're watching again. And yes, being a non-knitter, she doesn't understand how we can talk about this for days, y'all. We can talk about all the yarn, all the projects. And yeah, so I don't know how long I've been recording at this point, but I'm sure there is plenty more to talk about, but I will save that for the next episode. So once again, if you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love to have you join me on this journey of my solo knitting podcast, and I hope to see you again in the next one. All right, I'll drop all the links in the description box, and I'll see you around, hopefully on social media, TikTok, Instagram. I hope to see you there in between episodes. And until next time, take care, happy knitting, and stay warm and cozy. Bye.